Welcome to the next episode of the Talk of the Town podcast. I am Cameron Cole, and this is
Kevin Cole, former mayor, City of Pearland.
Yeah, so last week was quite the starter, I would say, of our podcast here. So, but thank you guys for tuning in for our second episode here. And today we're kind of going to go through this the history of Pearland. We started back in 1894, and here we are in 2026, knocking on the door of 150,000 in city and all that. So today we're going to kind of go through the journey of the city of Pearland.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been asked over the years, just kind of how we developed and why did we explode as a city and the hyper growth. We were one of the first cities the first city in Brazoria County to experience the hyper growth, not just solid growth, but hyper growth and those types of things. And so I get asked a lot about, why did that happen? How did it happen? How did we deal with it? And those types of things.
Well, in 1894 is when our city was founded. We mentioned this last week with Zelinsky, being one of the first. He was considered to be the chief developer of the 1890s and early 1900s.
Right.
Of course, we have Zelinsky Park here in the city, in the Old Town site. The city wasn't originally named Pearland.
No, the first original way back when, even before that, was Mark Belt.
And the reason why is because, the city of Houston wanted a railroad from Houston all the way down to Galveston, which we have here in the city today. It was kind of a combination between the Gulf, the Colorado, and the Santa Fe Railroad. Kind of built that, which kind of sparked a...
Yeah, so we actually had, the depot that sits next to, the train depot that sits next to City Hall.
Right there on Liberty Drive.
Right there on Liberty Drive. When it was at the railroad tracks, it was built down by the railroad track circa 1907, 1910-ish time frame. But even then, the stop on the railroad was the Mark Belt stop.
Train stop.
Right. And so while that really wasn't the name of the city, that was what we were known for, is the Mark Belt.
Yep. And why are we called Pearland? There are no pears.
Well, there were. We had pear trees in the area. And if I don't know if you've ever heard about this storm, but I don't know,
just a little bit.
The storm of 1900. Before they started naming hurricanes with names, they were just the storm of.
Yep.
So the 1900 storm that obviously devastated Galveston and all of that kind of thing didn't just devastate Galveston. I mean, that was a massive storm. Came all the way through, destroying
all the orchards,
pear tree grows and orchards.
It's my understanding that there were some that were able to rebuild, replant, and it wasn't until there was a massive 1918 freeze that then took the rest of them out. Yeah. And
welcome to Texas weather.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, and something else will happen.
And the rest is history.
Right.
We don't have any pears since then.
Right.
And since we're talking about Pearland, I know we'll get into the incorporation in a little bit, but the way we spell Pearland today, combined, was not how it was platted.
Yeah, so if you go back and look at the original plat, that's how we became a city, and you plat land. That's how you create a residential lot and those types of things. Anyway, so on that original plat signed by Zelinsky all the way back in 1894, Pearland is listed on there in two different fashions.
And we don't have them.
Yeah, so it's listed on there as two words, pear, land, okay? And it's also listed on there as Pearland hyphenated. So pear hyphen land, and we chose neither. We put them together as one word and became Pearland.
Founding fathers just went, nope, combined.
Now, I will say it's kind of funny. That actually was brought up in the mid 1990s. I was on council, again, 95 through 98 during that time period. So during that period, we actually had a group of historians here in our city, the Historical Society and others, that wanted us to take Pearland, one word, and make it two words. And I remember the conversation.
Every once in a while, you'll hear this conversation.
You'll hear it.
Every once in a while.
And I remember being a part of that conversation and finally kind of making the comment, we have a lot of work to do as a city because we're
every sign, Every
Every sign,
logo.
stationery, everything else, not just at the city, but every business would have to be changed. And it was like, we have a lot of other topics to be discussing, you know, changing how we spell the, in 2 words is probably not the highest priority. So kind of got
Crazy.
left alone and moved on.
So we had, Zelensky, who originally owned around, I believe 2,500 acres, which is now considered.
Well, the Old Town site itself was 480 some odd acres.
Right, but he owned about 2,500 acres. Of course, we talk about the 1900, the storm of 1900, wiping out the crops and the orchards here in Pearland. 1918 got the rest of them.
Right.
And then in the 1930s oil was discovered, kind of in the Hastings
Oil Field, south between Pearland and Alvin,
Correct.
down 35.
So, Pearland was known very early on as for their fruit, pear. Of course, they quickly rebounded with oil. So that was in the 1930s.
Hence the Pearland Oilers.
Yep.
The mascot was named after because of the oil fields.
There you go. It wasn't. Yep. It's because of right here in
they existed before the Houston Oilers existed.
Which we'll get to that later.
Yeah.
And then finally in 1959, our city was incorporated.
Right.
Any kind of stories or anything, any feedback on that?
Yeah, and it took about 2 years. Well, so they did the incorporation in 1959, and immediately upon getting here, as a city and incorporating as a city, they did some, quote, strip annexation. So you have the city and the city limits, and then the area around it is known as its ETJ, or extraterritorial jurisdiction.
And before you get into that, Houston was looking for land.
Right.
They were grabbing land as much as they can back in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
So
they had this massive expansion of wanting to come down. We know about Clear Lake and all that was as a result of annexation down in that area. You've heard about the annexations in Kingwood and so forth and so on. All of those types of things, people were very well aware that the city of Houston was very aggressive in wanting to expand its footprint.
So what did you mentioned the strip, the annexation strip.
Right.
It was roughly 100 feet wide at the time.
So if you go and look at our map and you go look at the ETJ and you go back decades, you had the city of Pearland, very, very small, but then we had this huge footprint of an ETJ, about 77 square miles out there. And the founding, not the founding fathers, but the fathers of our incorporation in 59 and 60 thought it was wise that we go out and put a 100-foot strip of city limits all the way around our ETJ, because the city of Houston could not go over that strip,
that line,
and come in and annex us. And so it took about 2 years. It started in 59 and completed in 1960, this 100-foot strip all the way around our ETJ. And since that time, we've been able to annex kind of off the strip as well as the core. Now, today, and shortly, somewhere between 1960 and, the 80s and 90s, the state legislature changed some of its rules on how you can annex. And we would not be able to go and annex a strip around our ETJ anymore. They've changed some of the rules on annexations since that time. But the fathers of our city at that time, it was a very, very wise move. So Pearland could be Pearland, Houston could be Houston, and we wouldn't have Houston come in. And that strip is still out there. It's still intact where it needs to be.
It might have shrunk a little bit as far as 100 foot.
Yeah, we've got a couple of areas where we've shrunk it, because you can imagine we've got subdivisions and things that are built where, imagine, a part of your yard is in Pearland Strip, and then
other parts in the
parts in the ETJ, and so people don't get confused with all that and the taxing authorities and everything else. We've taken that strip down to as low as 1 foot in a couple of areas.
Could you give me an area?
Yeah, so if you go off of Highway 6 and the Fort Bend County area, right back towards Arcola, right back over in there's a subdivision over there where there's homes along our strip, and so they didn't get taxed as being in the city for that 100 foot, we have taken it all the way down to 1 foot. So essentially, we're not taxing them for that 1 foot.
Interesting.
The back of their life.
Yeah. So we were incorporated in 1959 as City of Pearland.
Right.
Do you know the first incorporated city in Brazoria County?
The first one was Alvin, and that was all the way back in the 1800s.
Yeah,
I
think it was 1893 as incorporated, which is crazy.
Incorporated.
A lot of people think, just a little fun fact for you guys, a lot of people think West Columbia, Brazoria, which is the birthplace of Texas, is the first incorporated cities in Brazoria County. Even though they're part of the, Stephen F. Austin's Old 300, they weren't incorporated till much, much later.
Right. Actually incorporated.
Yeah, but they were huge and part of back in the 1820s. We all know that, and so it's kind of a fascinating. We actually dig down into their history.
Brazoria County is a fascinating place for history, the birthplace of Texas, and all of those kind of things. It's an incredible. We'll get into some of that history at some point in time.
So today, just kind of going over my notes a little bit. Yeah, we kind of briefly talked about the history, but you mentioned earlier when we first started today, we grew exponentially.
Right.
We didn't just double. Right. We quadrupled in a couple of years. But
we did.
How do we get here?
Yeah. So if you actually go back from the incorporation in 59 and 60, in 1960, I'd have to go back and look, but 1,800, 2,000-ish people to 1970, 64, 44, because I remember that was what was on the sign when I moved here in 77.
Which, when you moved in 77, you were in the new neighborhood.
Oh, yeah. I was in the new neighbor, Wood Creek. They're on 518, towards Friendswood. The city limits stopped at about O'Day Road, Garden Road, somewhere right in that ballpark, and it all the way east. And so the east versus west of our city at that time was the railroad tracks. Okay, so if you either lived west of the tracks and you were a west sider, or you lived east of the railroad tracks and you were an east sider.
And that goes back 40 years.
That goes back. Well, I moved here in 1977, so next year will be 50 years. So, and I know I wasn't born yet. So anyway, so my age, but we moved here in 1977. So best guess was, I don't know, 9,000-10,000 people. That was our population at that point in time. But in 1980, our population was about 13,000. So doubled in 10 years.
10 years.
Okay. It went from there to about 19,000 from 80 to 90. And then it went from 19,000 to about 30-ish, 32,000
by 2000.
By 2000. So we had strong growth as a city. No secret, we're right here next to the city of Houston. You got an airport and Hobby Airport. You got the Med Center, Job Center, downtown, all those kind of things. And so Pearland was always destined to grow. 288 got built in the mid 80s. If you go back and look, and just pull all this stuff up on Google Earth, and
I've actually done that. I went to Google Earth and I zoomed in on just the city of Pearland, and I think Google Earth can go back as far as 1984 in their time lapse.
Right.
So not in their time lapse. You can go back farther.
Right.
But in their time lapse, 1984, and just hit play. And just watch the city of Pearland grow, and it's
a fascinating
watch it all progress, westward. Yeah. I mean, you have plenty of stories. Dead Man Curve. I mean,
so obviously, and I had heard as a kid with my parents talking to neighbors and others, in the late 70s and early 80s, that Pearland was going to go through this massive growth, at some point in time, right? And so the city wanted to get ready for it, and and even back in those days, the city was already establishing zoning, establishing comprehensive plans, and those types of things. And so, but we started seeing in the mid 90s, more and more subdivisions coming into Pearland, north and south, up and down, Harkey, up and down Veterans, McLean, and places like that. You started seeing. I served on planning and zoning in 1994. And I remember sitting through a bunch of meetings where we talked about zoning, where we talked about platting, but we weren't talking about planning and zoning. We were doing plenty of zoning. We needed to be talking about planning. And so I remember city limits ended at Garden Road, and raising the question as a commissioner, going, shouldn't we be annexing the city to the west so we can put new development up under city control, so we knew what was coming in from a well-planned city all the way out there on the western edge. And so led our city, our Planning and Zoning Commission, to approve a potential annexation in 1994. We voted on that in 94, or actually in early 95 as a commission. I was elected to city council in May of 95, and so I got to vote on that annexation as a commissioner, and then got to vote on that as a council member in 95 to go in effect January 1 of 96. And so we did that western expansion, and it was a strip down 518, very, very large, all the way out past 1128. It was as far as we went at that point in time. And it was interesting. You can go back and look. There were some areas out there that were undesirable type development, and we were able to put that under control.
I'm sure there's some people listening to this can pinpoint some of those undesirable
and so once something's built, it's going to be there for 40 or 50 years, and you're going to have to live with it. And so we knew this expansion was going to happen. So 288 was already built. 518 and Broadway got extended from Cullen all the way to 288 in the 80s and early 90s, and in the 80s. And so but it wasn't 288. So Southwick was already built. Silver Lake was under development.
It was all in the mid-90s, correct?
Mid-90s. Country Place was coming up. Silver Lake and Southwick actually started in the early to mid-80s, and so did Country Place. And so those were out there off of 288, and they were there, their own places, mud districts that were out there, and all of that. And but that's not what caused our city to explode.
Right.
What caused us to explode was the closing of the Beltway on the south side in 1996.
South side of Houston, north of Pearland.
South side of Houston.
Because it was the last segment, correct?
That's correct. At that point in time, well, there was another segment around the east and northeast that needed to be completed. They had the frontage roads, but the freeway section closed in 1996 right here, outside of Pearland. And you can go back and track single-family building permits up until that point, and they'd always been healthy. Again, we were doubling
Steady.
every 10 years,
right?
Which doubling in 10 years is a 7.2% growth rate, right? But you then saw it exponentially go up.
As soon as that boat was
As soon as that happened. And so it was because it was now the access, not just north and south, but east and west. So that access and that driving pattern changed all of it. So it was, we really lit on fire. But what's interesting, and I want to talk about this a little bit, some of that history, right? And the rest is history. You can go and look on Google Earth and watch that thing, fill out and everything else. It's pretty amazing to watch. But somewhere in the 96 to 98 time frame, so right in that period, it was an interesting thing. We almost landed a NASCAR track. So the Cullen family, the Cullen Foundation, Cullen Road goes into Houston, the Cullen family and the Cullen Foundation had commissioned a study somewhere around 1990 to know what cities in the U.S. could support a NASCAR track that did not have one. Okay, and so the 5 cities that they came out with, I do not remember all of the 5 cities, but I do remember the number one city that could, according to their study, that could support a NASCAR track that didn't have one was Houston. And so we had talked with members of NASCAR. We had talked to members of investment groups that were looking to actually put a NASCAR track where Shadow Creek sits right now. NASCAR track where Shadow Creek sits today. So before the developers of Shadow Creek came in, we were actually looking at that. Coincidentally, at the exact same time all of that was happening, if you'll recall, the Houston Oilers, Bud Adams, and wanting a new stadium and all those kind of things away from the Astrodome, they were in active talks about how, what, and where. So we actually entered those talks as a city with Bud Adams, because if you'll think about it, at the time, he was looking at actually putting his own money into the stadium, okay, not just the taxpayers, but he himself, which also brought in the city of Houston, University of Houston and the Cougars into, because remember, they played in the Astrodome. And so to come into it. And he wanted not just a dome stadium, but he wanted a retractable seat stadium. So you have your football field laid out like this, and it would retract in to make a basketball arena. So we had conversations with the Rockets. This is all before Toyota. This is all before any of that stuff was built. And so we actually had active talks with NASCAR, big, huge parking areas and everything else.
Massive.
What goes with it? Let's put the football stadium. Let's make it football and basketball
retractable with basketball
together. And so it was active in these talks. So I remember going to Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo in the Dome. I was sitting with the city manager, and we were watching the show, and I leaned over. I said, "Look around. Think about this. Live from Pearland, Texas, Super Bowl, whatever. Because if we land that NFL stadium,
it's a new one.
You're going to get the Super Bowl. Could you imagine the Super Bowl in Pearland, Texas? Now, we would not have the population that we do today.
No, you would
had
not.
That happen.
Right. But it would be a juggernaut economically.
Correct. It would have been unbelievable what would have happened business-wise as a result.
I'm trying to wrap my head around going to watch the Rockets. Who knows? The Oilers would be here still.
Correct.
We wouldn't have necessarily the Texans, but and NASCAR. I remember growing up, watched NASCAR growing up. It's kind of fascinating to think about, right here in our own backyard.
Would have been a phenomenal. But Bud got mad at
Bud Adams got mad
at the mayor of Houston, packed up,
went to Tennessee,
and
the
plan collapsed.
Because he ran off to Tennessee, the other parts of it collapsed with it.
Everything fell as a result of it. And
Thanks, Bud.
we now have Shadow Creek. So the developers of Shadow Creek showed up about a year after all of that went south and started buying up that land. And as we say, rest is history.
So how fast have we grown? Kind of give us some numbers.
And just from 2000 to 2010, for example, we grew at 143%.
If I'm not mistaken,
we almost tripled.
We were the fastest growing city in the country, or top. One of the top.
We were number one in Texas for sure.
One
of the tops in the nation during that time period. And again, I served on council from 2004 through 2010 during that time period. And I mean, it was every Monday night we were meeting. We were talking infrastructure. We were talking about all those kind of things. And so it's just an amazing at how fast we grew. And I will tell you, even the developers at Shadow Creek will tell you, they told us at the time, they'll tell you today, they grew way faster than they ever expected. No one expected that master plan community out there of over 3,000 acres to be built out as quickly as they thought. We probably went in double the time of their expectation. Okay, but it is what it is. That's just what happens. The proximity to Houston, the housing market, all those kind of things. If you'll recall, in 2008, we had the downturn because of all of those kind of the subprime lending and all of that. We had foreclosures as a result of that, and we had to deal with it. But the growth of our city, western expansion, so it was pretty amazing. Watching water and sewer go down 518. Next thing you know, it's out at 288. Next thing you know, hops the freeway out there, and like to say, the rest is history.
So, looking back on it now, just what do you miss about the early 70s and 80s of Pearland, if any?
Oh wow! So, like you said, when I moved here in 1977, the high school where I graduated from high school, Pearland High School, is where SAB and Junior High West is today. So that was my high school. My stadium was Presner.
Oh, I remember going to those games.
Not the Rig, and those types of things. And so I do miss the smallness of that, the togetherness of our city. Really and truly, everybody knew everybody. It was the largest small town in America, and as it continued to grow, it's just amazing at how our city has stayed where there's a small town feel. And as mayor, people always ask me, how do you maintain that? Well, you maintain it by taking care of people, taking care of needs, unmet needs with people. Well, it's important.
That is absolutely one thing that I've seen, from a personal level, even, the rallying of the community when something happens,
right.
Whether that's something personal within a family member or a natural disaster that might come in.
Right.
You definitely have those neighbors, the community feel, the tightness that really
and so
shows through.
I've always told people I've never seen a need go unmet
absolutely
in our city as long as the need is known.
Correct.
Okay? Now, because don't expect people to meet your need if you don't
assume
let people know
it.
And just like and a personal story with you and Sarah and the kids in Harvey. You guys were living in Friendswood, a block away from the epicenter where Clear Creek and Mary's Creek and Cowards Creek all converge. And I mean, you guys got 3 foot of water in your house, lost everything that you had. Right. And the community, family, and everything else rallied around you, and you guys were set up in another house by the end of that week.
Correct.
Which was amazing. It was a God thing. But it was everybody rallying together to make that happen. So what happens in small towns? If you go to small town America, small town Texas, people know each other, needs get met. Love your neighbor. Love your neighbor. Meet your neighbor's needs. Get to know your neighbor. You don't have to get to know the whole city. Get to know your neighbor, people on both sides and across the street,
right.
Okay? And check in on them, especially if they're elderly. Just check in. Right. Say hi, okay? And be nice with your neighbors. And if there's a need, meet it. Meet it. Pay it forward. That's when pay it forward started. Pay that forward. Why? It'll come back to you tenfold.
Oh, yeah. And we've definitely felt the love of the community every step of the way.
Yeah.
One more question before you on this one. With the rapid growth of Pearland, what was your favorite development, if you can point to one?
Favorite development or favorite project?
Either one.
Okay.
Well, I'll say, favorite project. Either
favorite
one.
Project. There is one. It's not the sexiest of projects, right? I mean, you have projects, buildings, police station, all those kind of things, which is kind of cool. But my favorite project is the Cowards Creek Diversion Project, okay? And I ran on it.
I'm trying to figure out what that even is. Creek Divergent.
So I'm going to explain it. So if you go down to Bailey, for anybody that's been around Pearland for decades, Bailey is known as County Road 101. I refer to it as Bailey 101. So that way, people who are new understand Bailey. Anybody that's been around here for a while understands 101. So Bailey 101. And Bailey 101, the ditch, before it was widened to 4 lanes on that south side, was deep, big.
I remember.
Dangerous ditch. It was actually Cowards Creek. Okay, it was actually Cowards Creek. So when Bailey was being contemplated in a 2001 bond program to be widened, how we dealt with that ditch was not taken into consideration by the engineers on the front end. So as a result, we can't just fill that in. It's a creek.
It's a creek.
Okay? They were looking at just box culverting the whole thing, which exploded the cost. So as mentioned, I served on council 95 to 98, and then I came back in 04. So in 2004, when I ran for election, as a developer in real estate, I kept looking at that project going, you have to think outside the box. You got to think outside the box. And me and some of the people in my development company and everything else, we actually looked at it on a map and said, we could move the creek. We could move the creek.
Move the creek.
Now, when I ran,
challenging.
When I ran for election in 04, I did not tell people to think outside the box and move the creek. I just told people to think outside the box. They would have thought I was nuts if I'd have said move the creek. So got elected, 63 or 68%. I can't remember. I have to go back and look. So I've slept since then. And so here we are, and 4 months in, we're talking about capital improvements projects and everything else. Joe Wirtz was our projects director and everything else. I'm sitting in a meeting. We're actually talking about Bailey. And I said, Joe, you got to think outside the box. You got to think outside the box on the drainage.
What are you talking about,
He goes,
Kevin?
well, what do you mean? And I said, well, Joe, move the creek.
All right. What was his initial reaction on that?
Okay, so Joe did a Scooby-Doo impression like nobody's business. Okay, he went, huh? Huh? Like that. And the whole room went, what? And I said,
Move the creek.
there's a path forward, move the creek. To his credit, team went back. 4, 5, 6 months later, he came back and said, Mayor, Council,
We're going to move the creek.
we can move the creek. So if you're driving Bailey today and you get down by Ravenwood and West Lee on the north side, there is a ditch that runs south. You can see it. You can see it moving south.
Boom.
That is the diversion. It's the Cowards Creek Diversion Project. So we're moving water and moving the creek south there. It crosses County Road 100.
I was about to say, you can really see it in the new development of Massey Oaks down
Well,
there.
and you can see it from an aerial. You can see it built, and it angles down, and then there's a large 80-acre detention pond down there. Long story short, it was presented. This is something we could do. We firmed up a project. We had a bond program in 2007. I was up for re-election with it, but in 2007, and a part of that bond program was the Cowards Creek Diversion Project was in that bond program, overwhelmingly voted on by our public and our voters. And so it was actually after I left council in 2010 that they got around to actually constructing it, but got it constructed pre-Harvey.
Yep.
So here was what was important. This is why it was so important to me, was the acreage between 100 and 101 is all out there. Most of that acreage and those homes were in the 100-year floodplain. This project actually moved water out of that and shrunk the floodplain. It shrunk the water surface elevation at a 100-year event by over a foot, which is huge. So Harvey then comes and hits, and you didn't have flooding in that area because of that project. So that saved structures, it saved people's lives, it saved their livelihoods, it saved their property, and so that is why it's by far my favorite project, because it had an impact on people's lives.
True impact. And
Impact.
Well, that's what we're here as a Talk of the Town podcast, because we really do want to talk about local impact.
Right.
And so if you want to hear more of those stories, we'll tune into next week, because we're going to kind of dive into more developmental stories.
If you really want to know why the Pearland Town Center developed and the area around Bass Pro didn't, tune in next week and we'll tell you the story.
Well, that does it again here for the Talk of the Town. My name's Cameron. That's Kevin. We'll see you next time.